What is going on, everybody? I am back once again. Travis Fowler Harkrider is back with a new edition of the Four Corner Podcast. I'm sorry that I wasn't here last week to present a new episode for you. I had some personal issues that I had to take care of, but that's all solved. We are back. Wrestlemania is this Saturday and Sunday, and honestly, some people are always going to complain about it or always going to complain about any card that you get released, whether it's WWE, AEW, TNA, what have you. But I personally feel like this card for WrestleMania is one of the best cards that I have seen put together structurally, both in terms of stories and people that are participating in it. I'll talk a little bit more about that near the tail end of this episode, as we will also talk another topic that some people will maybe find a little controversial, and the overall take of professional wrestling. But let's not waste any more time. Let's talk wrestling, because over the last couple weeks, there's been some highs, there's been some dramas, because hey, it's professional wrestling after all. You never get away from the drama because there's always a bunch that comes to the forefront. Like this past week's biggest drama was once again the attacks between Tony Khan and Eric Bischoff, but this time it came from Tony to start. This one, I should say, is like the second time, maybe even the third, that Tony's kind of picked a fight with Bischoff. But it more so started over the announcement of his Strictly Business podcast with John Alba. I don't want to say getting canceled, but they are ending the podcast because, as both Bischoff and Alba had said, their personal lives were just very hard to commingle schedules at times because they were in different time zones. Both are busy men as is, so it was hard for their schedules to always line up accordingly. So they just felt it was best to end the podcast. They still are friends. They have announced that on both fronts. No matter what differences of opinions they may have had, that was strictly because of what the subject matter was, which is just pro wrestling, and neither one of them took it personally. Do they differ when it comes to personal views as well as wrestling views? They both said sure, but no hard feelings between the two, and it was sad that a podcast that many people enjoyed is going away. Well, apparently Tony saw that and decided to take a couple shots at it. The first one was talking about how it was a fraud of a wrestling podcast ending, and that was done at like 2 or 3 in the morning, something like that. And you knew Eazy-E was going to respond, and he did so in kind and started throwing out all the other things that we have seen other people talk about, from attendance to their numbers not growing on TV. You know, the same things that he's talked about on the 83 Weeks podcast and Strictly Business, and how to help curve that if they can, or at least think of a solution that can help them on an upward trend. And Tony takes it personally. And Bischoff then is going to take it personally when you go after him. So it just exploded in one day. And it even led to Bischoff debuting a brand new web series for YouTube that he is calling Wise Choices, seeing that Tony Khan's tweet actually was stating that it was a good idea that he ended the Strictly Business podcast before the media rights deal was actually announced, which we still don't know when that'll be or if that will be. But he said that was a wise choice on Bischoff's part. So in kind, Bischoff named the show Wise Choices, and yours truly, as I knock the microphone over, I got to get my train of thought back in, but yours truly actually submitted a question on that debut episode, and I'll throw it up here on the screen for you to see now. It was really cool that he actually did answer the question, but you know, I always have found Eric's take on things to be very insightful, and it's not coming from a place of somebody hoping that AEW goes away. Matter of fact, he has said countless times that he wants AEW to succeed. They just, in his opinion, and it's kind of hard to justify anything else, they just have a problem with management and TV production. They haven't quite found that spot yet, at least in some people's eyes, Bischoff being one of them. So I still think there's plenty of time for that to curve, and AEW is not going anywhere. They are definitely the alternative. They are what people can tune into if you're not into the WWE side of professional wrestling, which is, as we've said numerous times, is a great thing that we have AEW because it does provide a different product. But I really do hope that Tony Khan can get whatever it is, if there is any kind of situations that are out of hand or out of control or whatever. Hopefully all of that can get corrected and AEW sticks around much, much longer than what people think it will. I, again, don't think it's going anywhere. With the money that Tony Khan has, he can make this thing go as long as he really wants. So, I don't think they're in jeopardy of getting canceled or anything like that. It's more so of hoping that they have the TV media rights deal to continue with Turner. And if not, hopefully they can find another home destination if for whatever reason WBD doesn't strike a deal for them. But on from that, and let's talk about Mercedes Moné for a second. She's been in AEW for 3 weeks now. We have yet to see her wrestle. She has gotten physical, but she has not had an official match yet. Some people, like Dave Meltzer, think that that's what's kind of hurting her aura at the moment, and he could be right. It's not really done any kind of difference in the ratings or attendance figures, really. They're still right about where they've been for a while now. So it hasn't been like a game-changing move that she's been brought in. But I still do believe that she was a great signing. I think she's one of, if not the top women's wrestler, at least stateside. I've felt that way for many years. There's plenty of people who could make the argument that she isn't one of the best. At the very least, you have to put her within the top 10, in my opinion. For me, she's top 5. So I honestly think Mercedes, in-ring wise, is going to be great for AEW, but as we said before it was officially announced, and as it's been talked about with other big-time signings, until they fix any other problems that they have when it comes to TV production and attendance figures, it's not really going to make too much of a difference whoever they sign and bring in that has a big name to them. It isn't. We've seen it happen now more than once, whether it be Moné, whether it be Okada, Ospreay, Jay White, whoever. It doesn't matter. There hasn't been any real significant change in those two factors, which are the most important factors for AEW. But one of the reasons I wanted to talk about Mercedes is mainly because of something that she said in an interview recently about her time with WWE and how she felt like, in a way, WWE took away her lifelong dream. It's something she always wanted, and she always felt like, or at least, I won't say always, I need to refrain from saying that. But at this moment, she has said that WWE has taken away some of her dream, and I guess now she's rediscovered it since she's left the E and had her own career renaissance, if you will, from her leaving the E and going to New Japan for a little while to now coming back here to the States in AEW. But yet in the same time, she has said that she will go back to WWE at some point in time. So it's kind of contradictory in what she says. And then on top of that, to some news reports, the comments that she made of her going back to WWE sometime in the future didn't rub certain people the right way when she was just about to debut on AEW. I even made mention that I don't think that that's something that you would want to do right before you're about to debut for its main competitor. So, but overall, it's still yet to be known what kind of legacy Moné is going to leave behind with AEW when she actually does start to wrestle, and then how long she intends to be there. I don't think the terms of her deal have been even remotely close to being announced. Most of the AEW deals that we hear about, though, are usually a 3-year to a 5-year deal. So I fully expect one of those to be the case. Me personally, just because, as I've expressed before, I think not having her a part of WrestleMania this year, especially in the Bayley feud, was such a lost opportunity for not just WWE, but I do believe for Moné as well. I think she would have fit in perfectly. And even though Jade Cargill has filled that spot that I think she could have been in masterfully, I still think it was a missed opportunity for both sides. But obviously, both are doing just fine and they've both moved forward. So, not really that big of a loss for probably either side. Just as a fan, I think it was a missed opportunity. While we're still on AEW, there's two other things I want to talk about before we get into some potential free agency news. One we know for sure, the other one is kind of a maybe, but we don't really know, and maybe it's unlikely. But before we get there, Jack Perry, who has earned his own reputation for being, as he's called himself in New Japan recently, the scapegoat, he is apparently not coming back to AEW anytime soon. And if you believe any of the dirt sheets that have been released on his status with AEW and Tony Khan specifically, right now they're not talking and haven't talked in quite some time. So I don't know if we will see Jack Perry back in AEW. I'm sure we will, considering he does have a contract. No matter how much he rips up a contract on New Japan television, I'm pretty sure he's still going to have to fulfill that obligation. So I don't know when we'll see him. But again, if you believe dirt sheets, part of the issue is that Tony still blames him for the CM Punk thing. And it's kind of hard not to, because when you go back and you listen to that whole situation as it was, I fully believe that Jack Perry does play a big part into why Punk is no longer not only with AEW, but signed once again to WWE, who reportedly this week, as much as there might be issues personally between Punk and Rollins, according to outlets, the two have been nothing but professional and have actually gotten along during any of the times that they need to talk about their segments and work out things for the show. So, it's kind of hard not to begrudge Tony a little bit and be like, yeah, you kind of got a point that your biggest draw was basically sent to the pasture and now has actually found out that maybe the grass was greener on the other side after all. Despite the tricep injury, it looks like Punk has just fit right back into the WWE form like a glove. So I don't blame him for having a little bit of bad feelings, but at the same time, you can't cry over spilt milk forever, and you eventually got to move on. So as long as both sides are happy at the moment, then really who can begrudge us to be like, oh, well, you should do this or you should do that. It's not our business. It's no one's business but the people involved. So, and he seems to be doing well. He being Jack Perry seems to be doing just fine right now with his scapegoat gimmick in New Japan. I do think we'll eventually see it back on AEW. Probably, I would think Forbidden Door would probably be the best bet to think he would show back up, because that's when we obviously see New Japan and AEW work together annually now. So I fully expect to see him back sooner rather than later. Maybe we'll be shocked. Maybe he'll become a free agent. Who knows? But we do know that there is one set of free agents, and I want to see them go to WWE only because I think they would be sort of lost in the shuffle with AEW, no matter how many teams over there they may have worked with at some point in time, specifically the Bucks and their feud back in TNA when it was the Guns against what was known as Generation Me at the time. And I get that people would want to see that. But honestly, I would love to see what Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley could do in the WWE. I think they could be a great fit for the tag team division. And I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility either, because AJ Styles, who worked closely with them during his TNA days, came out in an interview recently and said, I wish that more guys would understand that this is not the same WWE. And of course, he's referring to the McMahon era of WWE. Now with Triple H in charge of creative fully, and with TKO being in charge of WWE as a whole, it really has seemingly been a different company from many different people who have said that the atmosphere is just so much better than what it once was. And I think they could fit in perfectly with this new era if they give it a shot. And who's to say that Styles can't get in their ear or that they won't ask his opinion? You know, they are free agents as of Monday, which is very exciting. Today is their free agent day, April 1st. So Wrestlemania is this weekend. It's hard to think that maybe there isn't some sort of surprise, or it could be a surprise. Stand and Deliver is even there. You could throw them in on NXT if you wanted to. Hell, Gallows and Anderson are doing their thing over there right now, so why not the Guns too? But I did want to actually track back just for a second, because there was one thing that came to my mind over the last couple weeks that I really do think should be talked about. Tony Khan did an interview, and whether he meant strictly just the women's division or as a whole, I believe he had listed Mercedes Moné as quite possibly being the face of AEW. And that got me thinking, who really is the face of AEW right now? Because I don't know if you could say that there is one definitive person. I think maybe AEW has a syndrome of two worlds kind of thing. At one time, I think you could have made the argument that Jon Moxley, who is now being referred to as like the ace of AEW, even though he hasn't been seen on at least Dynamite for the last couple of weeks. I can't say that I haven't seen him on Collision because I haven't watched Collision in quite some time. So just being honest and open about that. But I think now, if you want to talk about face of a company, as we do with Cody Rhodes, who many people, myself included, will beat the drum that he is indeed WWE's new John Cena. He's the face of that company, and we all, well, some of us hope that coronation happens this upcoming Sunday when he is the new WWE champion. Fingers crossed. But I think when it comes to AEW, there's only two people right now that you could actually legitimately say could be the face of that company. And it would be either Swerve Strickland or one of their newest signings, Will Ospreay. Both men have a following right now that is on absolute fire. There are some people that believe this match between Swerve and Ospreay is going to be a moneymaker for the company, specifically with Wembley coming up. I could totally see, especially with AEW Dynasty right around the corner and Swerve now officially the number one contender for the title against Samoa Joe. If he wins that title and holds it all the way to August, it is very likely that we see Swerve Strickland versus Will Ospreay for the AEW Championship. I think right now AEW has a situation of like Rock Austin in 2000, 2001 for WWE. You could even argue 99 as well in there. I think that's the issue AEW has, which, do you really even think that's an issue when you've got two top tier talents like that are over with the audience? I don't think so. But if you had to pick one, who would it be? Why don't y'all sound off in those comments and let me know, between Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay, who do you think is the face of AEW? Or if you don't think either one of those is the face, why don't you tell me who you think the face of AEW is? Again, shout out in those comments down below, and let's talk wrestling on who's the face of AEW. Now, back over to the free agency topic. There's one name in particular that you could have made the argument was overall the face of AEW for at least a year, if not longer, whether he was a heel or a face, that being one Maxwell Jacob Friedman, MJF, who we know has been out with some injuries that he's trying to heal from after losing the title to Joe at World's End back in December. But over the last week or so, news has come out stating that his recovery time is going a little bit longer than what people anticipated. And I don't know. There always was that doubt in people's minds as to whether or not he legitimately was going to become a free agent in 2024. We heard him say it time and time again. As of January 2024, it would be the bidding war of 2024. Whether that's true or not, we've never had confirmed. But if indeed he is, then man, again, WrestleMania right around the corner. There are so many people. I, again, am one of those people. I believe MJF is tailor-made for WWE. His character work is on point. His promos are top level. And I wondered whether or not he would be able to hang in the WWE promo-wise with them being under the PG banner. But as we saw this past Monday with The Rock and Cody and their final segment of the night, where we heard Rock drop the F-bomb, and yes, it was censored on the live feed, but then the uncensored version made the internet rounds like clockwork, as expected. It also brought to light that with them going to Netflix here in January, Raw will no longer be censored. So it opens up a little bit more freedom creatively for these guys to do mic work, which, by the way, it was told that the segment with Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, and Punk this past Monday in Chicago, that nothing was planned out for that. It was all, hey, these are the notes. This is where we need to get to as a part of this whole thing. So just go out there and do it. And I think all three men killed that segment. It was one of, if not, I believe, the top rated segment of the night. That was even including the beatdown at the end with Rhodes and Rock, or even the stare down, I think, between the two of them at the beginning of the show. WWE's just firing on all cylinders, and it's amazing to watch right now. We saw last night on SmackDown, Jade Cargill finally making her debut on a show, and the entrance alone was absolutely amazing. She looks like a star. And then, of course, at the very end, we saw her come out and make the save from Damage Control and help out Bianca Belair and Naomi, and she looked good doing all that. The transition, especially when she had Kairi Sane and got her hooked for her finisher, man, it looked so good. And then the shot, the ending shot of all three women standing in the middle of the ring with the WrestleMania sign behind them. And we got the official announcement this morning, at least is when I saw it. I'm recording this on Saturday evening. And it's a made official 6-woman tag match. Bianca Belair, Naomi, and Jade Cargill versus Damage Control. Dakota Kai, Kairi Sane, and Asuka. I almost forgot those names. Who would have thought? It's pretty obvious to remember them. Damage Control's actually been really interesting, and the Io Sky Bayley storyline especially has been awesome as well. Now, before we get into any further WWE talk when it comes to WrestleMania, I want to talk about Ronda Rousey for a second, because she herself has been making rounds these last couple weeks, and honestly, I don't think any of it is to her favor. I was a huge Ronda Rousey fan in her MMA days. I mean, you can go back and watch. She was dominant so long in MMA. And then she got knocked out by Holly Holm. And then when she came back, again was knocked out by Amanda Nunes. Back-to-back losses, and then she just up and quit MMA and UFC altogether. Shows up in WWE. People, at least for the first run, were excited. I was very interested to see where this would go. And I still believe her overall run was really good for WWE. She had the great match with Angle against Triple H and Stephanie for her debut match at WrestleMania 34. That very same year, I felt she gave Nia Jax the best match that she had had in her career up to that point, and Ronda was a part of that. The match with her and Charlotte at Survivor Series was a favorite of mine for quite some time, until the ending, which I still have an issue with, much to the same situation that I had with the Triple H Sting match, and that ending sucking as well, because it just could have been better and you didn't have to end it the way you did. And I felt that way about Charlotte and Ronda Rousey as well. And overall, her being in the main event of the first WrestleMania all-women's main event was very good for the company. And as we heard, though, this past week from Becky Lynch, who's also doing media rounds on her own book, seems like Ronda still has some insecurity issues. And I can't say exactly what causes that. I think I have some hints though. But before I jump into any opinion like that, Rousey's statement that really got under my skin had to be something along the lines of talking about how Bruce Pritchard, Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, they're all basically douchebags. And at least two of those people we know for certain fits that mold. Bruce Pritchard's been rumored for so long, but honestly, I'm not going to say much about him because he's kind of been a favorite of mine, at least podcast wise, but I haven't heard many news stories about him being difficult to work with except her. Now, maybe there's others. I'm not even going to pretend like there's not a possibility that that's true. I just personally have not heard of anything. But she was making statements of like, I saw mistreatments of women and things like that. But in this very same book, she mentions about how even though she was being used as, in her words, Vince McMahon's effing action figure, it was still nice to collect those fat checks. So to me, you're being a hypocrite because here you are saying that you witnessed some of these, what you felt were deplorable actions towards women on the roster. And you as Ronda Rousey, who, as I made the argument on X about a week or so ago and had some dialogue back and forth with an acquaintance, a friend of mine, Gideon Vane, shout out to Gideon. He and I had talked about this on a little thread. And I think he and I both came to the same conclusion at the end of the day. I had made the argument of like, with her being the biggest name in WWE at that time, why couldn't she have just left the company if she felt so ick by it, you know? To which he said, well, you can't necessarily do that, or how can you do that when you've got a contract? Well, Punk did it. And I would go as far as to say Ronda Rousey was probably a bigger household name than CM Punk at the time. So I can't really say that that is a reason why she just let things go the way they did. She admitted that she enjoyed getting those big checks. So when you say stuff like that and then try to turn around and be an advocate and be someone who's like, oh no, women should be treated better in this certain company, but man, I was making all this money, then what are you really doing? You're not serving a purpose. You're not really doing anything to help the women there, even now, a place that you've said that you would never go back to. But this is also the same woman who apparently had an issue with tapping to Becky at WrestleMania. She refused to do it, as it came out from Becky Lynch in her book and her tour and interviews this past week. She flat out said that Ronda would not tap, stating that her mom would disown her if she ever tapped. And why? Because it's scripted? Come on. That's a pitiful excuse. She played her own Ronda man card, if you will, and said, no, I'm not doing that. Kind of reminds me of the rumors that people talk about, or the stories, not even necessarily rumors, because we know it's happened a time or two, but of someone rubbing their old Fu Manchu, Ronda Rousey pulling the, well, that's not going to work for me, sister. But overall, it just, I don't think is a good look for Rousey whatsoever. Some have even compared her to that of the delusionality of one Ryback, and I kind of can't disagree with that either. So I wish I had more good things to say about Ronda Rousey, but right now, as a once fan of her work, I find her disappointing on a professional and honestly a personal basis now. Whether that means anything to anybody, or I know it means nothing to her, doesn't matter. But this is just my opinion and how I feel about the topic at hand. Now, let's move back over to positive things, because WrestleMania is coming up. It's an exciting show. We talked about Jade Cargill getting involved in it now and her match officially being announced. WrestleMania has a lot of good matches scheduled for the show. I mean, the LA Knight AJ Styles match, honestly, I think has turned into a match that will be fun to watch. I didn't really like this feud to begin with, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. But over the last couple weeks, they've piqued my interest. You know, the whole LA Knight going to AJ's house, I thought was a great touch to it. My only complaint is that they didn't stick with like the body cam police footage or the footage from the dash cam. They actually had, production cameras there. I really wish they wouldn't have done that. But I guess in the same breath, it makes sense because I believe that started out with him doing an interview in his gym. So I guess that kind of would make sense that something like that would happen. I just wish they kind of would have stuck with that. But I think that's going to be a sleeper match. I think it'll be a lot better than what people anticipate. The unbelievable 6-team, 12 men all together ladder match for the undisputed tag titles. I still am hoping that they find a way to separate those belts. That's finally complete with all the participants announced. God, we've got Judgment Day. They're going to have a field day. You've got so many teams to worry about, from the Awesome Truth to DIY. We saw the 2 teams that got added in this past Friday on SmackDown. Grayson Waller and Austin Theory are in there now. God, there's just so many talents that are in that one match. New Catch Republic is in there. Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate have now become this new team officially on SmackDown. Still wish they'd call them British Strong Style, but I digress. Then you look at other matches. The U.S. title match, the triple threat with Logan Paul, Orton, and Kevin Owens. I think that's going to be a great match too, and it makes sense there. You've got the 2 women's matches for the respective titles. Becky Lynch versus Rhea Ripley is a phenomenal match that I think is going to be amazing to watch. Io Sky and Bayley for the women's title, the WWE women's title, the other one being for the women's world title, I think is a great match too. The story's been played up great there as well. You've got Intercontinental title match with Sami Zayn and Gunter, and even on a month's build, just the fact that the story is this impenetrable champion, it seems like, in the form of Gunter, and the underdog from the underground in his NXT days is gonna have to find a way to topple this gigantic reign of the IC championship. That should be a fun match to watch. You've got the 2 title matches with Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins. CM Punk apparently is playing commentator. I would have preferred ref, but I digress. Then you've also got the undisputed championship match with Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes for what I think will eventually be called again the WWE title after WrestleMania. But before we get to that match, the biggest implication match is going to be the tag match on night 1 with Rock and Roman versus Cody and Seth. That also reminds me, we've got Uso versus Uso, Jay and Jimmy. That's going to be a fun match too. My whole point in kind of running down the card a little bit from what I can just go off the top of my head, you're looking at 6 to 7 matches on each night, and apparently there's a mystery slot that's been revealed for either a return or maybe even some sort of surprise. Who knows what that could be? Again, we talked about a couple of free agent possibilities. Maybe something comes from that. We could see the return of a legend, maybe just a fun little spot, similar to like what we saw as an example with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 21. But I think the reason why I've enjoyed this road to WrestleMania so much is because everybody that's on that card feels important. It feels like everybody has a role. And this reminds me a lot of the old Attitude Era days. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily with the quality of the product, but I'm talking about when it comes to the characters and the stories that these characters are a part of. It seems like everybody has their place now in WWE, or at least the ones that we've had showcased to us. Everybody has their role. And when everybody has a certain role and you are able to build stories with those roles, it's much easier to create those stories. And I am very much a big believer in stories create professional wrestling. But that also I need to point out doesn't always need to be there. You don't always need story in order to have a wrestling match. You could have a wrestling match just for the sake of having said match. I think we're kind of seeing that with Bryan Danielson and Will Ospreay coming up at AEW's Dynasty pay-per-view. There hasn't really been much of a story between the two. We've seen literally just promo work, and it's been back and forth of who's the better wrestler. And that's an okay story. We've seen it done several times, but this could just simply be two of the best fighting each other to see who's the best amongst them and possibly be known as the best in the world currently. You can be that simple. It's okay. But when it comes to the overall presentation of wrestling, I think this road to WrestleMania has proven that story is one of, if not the most important aspect of building a successful wrestling company, a successful wrestling PLE, anything you want to refer to it as. It always comes back to story and storytelling. So that's just my opinion on it. And the last thing I want to say is, are we in a new era now of WWE? Because that seems to be what's going around right now. And if we are, what do we call this new era? Some people are already labeling it the Renaissance era. And as I said, I compared it to the Attitude Era when it comes to everybody having their place on the card and their specific role. I do think that we are in an era like that again. We've seen them pushing the envelope with language and blood again. Do I think we're entering Attitude 2.0? No. But do I think we're looking at what will end up being one of, if not the most successful era of WWE? Yeah, I think it's a great possibility. So I'm totally okay with calling it the Renaissance era. But that's just my thoughts on it. How about y'all sound off in those comments down below? What do you think that this new era of WWE should be called? Let me hear it down in those comments. And that's what I have. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. We are also on YouTube, which is where you should have been subscribed to our channel at this point, liked and share all of our content. Make sure that bell notification is on so you're notified anytime a new video is uploaded to the channel. And I will not be here next week. I've got a family vacation that I am taking, and it's WrestleMania week, so there's so much going on, from Stand and Deliver to the normal shows that we get each week from both WWE, AEW, and TNA. So we won't have a new edition of the 4CP next week, but we will have the Fallout edition after what looks to be great WrestleMania. And after WrestleMania, I can't wait to see what transpires. So until 2 weeks from now, I hope you guys have a great week ahead. I hope you enjoy WrestleMania. I know I'm going to. And until next time, you guys take care and just continue to love pro wrestling.